My parents said I didn't deserve a single thing in their will because I had no family. So I made a move that exposed their greed and left them broken. I'm a 35-year-old male who has been the family's backup plan while being treated like I barely matter. The breaking point was New Year's Eve. I cooked them dinner, opened my home, and right in the middle of it, they announced I'm cut out of the will. Everything's going to my deadbeat brother, the same guy who's never contributed to a damn thing. Buckle up, because this is what years of that bullshit looks like when someone finally snaps. Let me start with who I am, which explains everything that came after. At 14, I wasn't playing video games after school. I was pushing a mower through neighborhood lawns for $15 a pop. By 16, I was stocking shelves at the local grocery store, learning every manager's name, and volunteering for the shifts nobody wanted. Senior year, while my classmates were planning parties, I was working 30-plus hours weekly at that same store while keeping a 3.8 GPA, not because I was some exceptional kid, but because I had to. Community college was worse. Try working a full shift at AutoZone where you're covered in grease and dealing with guys who think you don't know a carburetor from a catalytic converter. Then switch shirts in your car to deliver pizzas until 2 a.m. Then wake up for an 8 a.m. class. I did that 5 days a week for 2 years straight, existing on energy drinks and those 5 precious hours of sleep. My proudest moment then was finding that 98 F-150 with 180,000 miles on Craigslist. The owner wanted $2,300, but I talked him down to $2,000, exactly what I had saved in my lockbox. That truck taught me everything about engines, transmissions, and the value of preventive maintenance. I'd spend Sundays underneath it, learning to replace brake pads and diagnose strange sounds. Meanwhile, my brother Alex, a 32-year-old male, was living in a whole different reality under the same roof. Everything was handed to him, and he never even had to ask. The thing that still bothers me to this day is that I needed braces badly. My canines were practically sideways. We just don't have $3,000 for cosmetic work right now, Mom explained. 2 years later, Alex got a full orthodontic workup, special ceramic brackets, the works. My Washington, D.C. trip with the debate team was too expensive. Alex's class trip to Italy and Greece the next year, they threw him a bon voyage party and gave him extra spending money. At 29, I finally got those braces myself. The orthodontist actually winced looking at my x-rays. This should have been addressed as a teenager, he said. The roots have fully set now, which means more force, more pain, and nearly twice as long. $5,800 and 26 months of metal-mouth adulthood later, I had the smile my parents couldn't afford when it mattered. We weren't struggling financially. Dad owned a successful plumbing supply business that contractors across 3 counties relied on. Mom managed a dental practice where she got staff discounts. They had money for what they valued, and clearly that wasn't me. I still have a photo somewhere of me wearing Alex's old winter jacket, a North Face he'd gotten bored with after 1 season. I'm clearly swimming in it, right? Nope, I'm the older brother. It was too small, barely covering my wrists, impossible to zip closed. I shoved newspapers into the sleeves for 3 Minnesota winters, walking to work with my lips turning blue. While Alex got dropped off at school in Mom's heated SUV, I put myself through community college, then state school for engineering. I'd wake up at 5 a.m. for my construction job, work till 2 p.m., go to classes till 8 p.m., then study till midnight. Repeat. My buddy Mike and I met on that construction site. We were both working our way through school, both first-generation college students. When things got rough, we'd cover each other's shifts or spot each other for textbooks. Mike's the kind of friend who'd give you his last $20 without hesitation. We once had to share a textbook for thermodynamics because neither of us could afford the $280 for a second copy. We'd meet at the campus library at midnight, often straight from our late shifts, and take turns photographing the homework problems with our flip phones. When I was 2 semesters from graduating, Dad needed bypass surgery. His insurance wouldn't cover everything, so I dropped out to work full-time, thinking I'd go back. It never happened. Meanwhile, Alex got 4 years fully paid at a private university, which he stretched into 6 before dropping out anyway. His reason? The professors didn't understand my vision. Classic Alex. The meeting with my academic advisor when I withdrew is burned into my memory. He looked at my transcript. A 3.86 GPA, only 2 semesters and 1 internship left, and just shook his head. "You're one of our top students," he said. "Are you sure there's no other way?" There wasn't. Dad's surgery was scheduled for the following week, and they needed $18,000 that insurance wouldn't cover. I cleared out my savings account, cashed in the bonds my grandfather had left me, and handed over every penny I had. Dad never even said thank you. Mom just said, "That's what family does." The same week I dropped out, I adopted my dog Max from the shelter, a scruffy mutt they were going to put down. Best decision I ever made. That dog kept me sane through some seriously dark times when I was working 70+ hours a week just to keep afloat. Started as a basic HVAC installer, making $13 an hour, sleeping on Mike's couch for 3 months when I couldn't make rent. Took every certification I could, worked holidays, weekends, overnight emergency calls in Minnesota winters when it's minus 30 degrees outside and someone's furnace dies at 2 a.m. Within 4 years, I was making decent money as a commercial systems specialist. Those first years in HVAC were brutal. My hands were constantly cut and calloused from crawling through ductwork and handling sheet metal. We'd be in attics in August when it's 140 degrees up there, sweating through our clothes in 15 minutes, or in crawl spaces in January with frozen pipes and mice running over our boots. I'd come home so exhausted I'd fall asleep with my work boots still on, then wake up at 5 a.m. to do it all again. But I learned every system inside and out. Lennox, Carrier, Train, Goodman. I could diagnose most issues just by listening to a unit run for 30 seconds. Meanwhile, after college, Alex bounced between jobs, bartending, selling cars, a stint in real estate that ended when he couldn't be bothered to show up for client meetings. Each failure was met with he's finding himself or his boss was intimidated by his potential. Alex's real estate career was peak Alex. Dad bankrolled everything, licensing course, GQ-worthy headshot, and 6 months of marketing expenses. Meanwhile, Alex rolled into the office around noon most days, rearranged his desk trinkets, and lectured everyone about his strategic vision. The final straw? He skipped showing a property to first-time buyers who'd driven 3 hours with their kids because he was getting a massage. Didn't call, didn't text, just ghosted them. His broker fired him the next day. That's when the real financial drain began. Every emergency landed on my shoulders. $12,000 for Dad's heart procedure, $4,800 for Mom's dental work, $6,700 to fix their leaking roof. Alex's disasters cost me thousands more. $30,500 for legal fees after a texting while driving accident, and $7,500 toward his failed restaurant scheme. And so it went on and on. Alex's restaurant venture was the pinnacle of stupidity. He and his college buddy decided to open an experimental cuisine spot featuring absurdities like sushi pizza and nacho ice cream. Their entire business plan? Instagram influencers will make us famous. My parents fronted $30,000 for the lease and renovations, which Alex burned through in weeks, $8,000 on a neon fusion confusion sign, and $12,000 on non-restaurant-grade imported furniture. They never served a single customer. The health inspector shut them down pre-opening for missing basic ventilation and grease traps. The landlord kept their deposit for damages, and naturally, I ended up covering part of the loss. 3 years in, I finally saved enough for a down payment on a modest $110,000 condo near the community college, a genuine steal. I was pre-approved, had 12% saved, inspection scheduled. When I shared this at Sunday dinner, Dad put down his fork and looked at me like I'd suggested joining a cult. "People like you rent," he said flatly. "Home ownership is for families." 2 weeks later, my down payment vanished to cover Dad's emergency gallbladder surgery. The next month, they loaned Alex $30,000 for that restaurant. It failed within a year. The loan was forgotten. There's a decade of this crap. I'm living in a small apartment in Minneapolis that I can barely afford because everything extra went to them. Got student loans from the degree I never finished and never been able to get ahead. My apartment is nothing special, 650 square feet in a building that was probably nice in the 1970s. The water pressure sucks. The neighbors argue at 2 a.m. every weekend, and the parking situation is a nightmare. But it's all I could afford after sending half my paychecks to my parents for years. Fast forward to New Year's Eve last month, I decided to host a small dinner at my place. Spent half my last paycheck on steaks and snacks, because I rarely get to host anything. Invited my buddy Mike from work, and his wife Tara, my girlfriend Jess, my old college roommate Derek, and, unfortunately, my parents and golden boy Alex with his wife Vanessa. Dad complained about the parking situation the moment they arrived. Mom made that face she always makes when she enters my apartment like she's walking into a truck stop bathroom. Alex showed up 30 minutes late, didn't bring anything, and immediately asked what else I had because he doesn't drink that cheap stuff. We were squeezed around my table, eating steaks I couldn't afford, when Dad tapped his glass and stood up. Since it's New Year's and we're all together, your mother and I want to share our estate planning update. Since you don't have a family of your own, Dan, we've decided everything is going to your brother and his kids. The house, the savings, everything, family legacy and all that." The room went silent. Mike nearly choked on his drink. Jess froze beside me. Alex just smirked while Vanessa suddenly became fascinated with her napkin. I wasn't shocked by their favoritism. That was my entire life story. I was stunned by the casual cruelty of announcing it during the New Year's dinner I was hosting in my home. After eating my food, I set down my fork and looked directly at my father. "That's interesting, because I've been getting a lot of calls about that reverse mortgage you begged me to co-sign." His smug expression faltered. "What are you talking about?" Mom asked, voice sharp. "The bank called yesterday because you're 3 months behind on payments on the loan I co-signed on the house you're so excited to leave to Alex." Dad's face reddened. "That's private family business. So is your will, but you seemed fine discussing that in front of everyone," I replied. "And while we're announcing things, should we talk about the $42,000 I've loaned you both over the last 5 years that you've never paid back? Or the $16,500 I gave Alex directly when he couldn't make rent for 6 straight months because he kept quitting jobs that were beneath him?" "We're your parents," Mom hissed. "That's what family does." "Apparently not all family," I said, gesturing to Alex, who was suddenly very interested in his phone. "Some family just takes." Mike, who'd witnessed their treatment of me for years, spoke up. "Mrs. Kellerman, with all due respect, that's a really crappy thing to announce at a New Year's dinner." "Stay out of this," Dad snapped. Jess, meeting my parents for the first time, added coldly, "Then maybe you should have discussed it in private." I stood up, grabbed my keys, and walked out of my own apartment, leaving them all sitting there with their mouths open. I drove around for an hour in my old F-150, Max riding shotgun like he always does when I need to clear my head. Ended up parked at the 24-hour Walmart, just sitting there, wondering how I'd been such a doormat for so long. Max has this way of putting his paw on my arm when I'm upset, like he's saying, "Hey man, I got you." We sat in the Walmart parking lot with the heater running just enough to keep us from freezing, watching people rush in for last-minute New Year's supplies. Everyone was getting ready to celebrate while my life was imploding. Max kept his paw on my arm the whole time. When I finally returned, everyone was gone except Jess. She'd cleaned up and was sitting on the couch waiting for me, petting Max, who'd immediately curled up next to her. That's one of the reasons I fell for her. My dog loved her from day one. "Your mom tried to take the leftover steaks home," she said. "I told her they were staying here." Jess grew up in a trailer park in rural Wisconsin, put herself through school to become a librarian. She gets it, the struggle, the hustle, the pride in building something from nothing. On our third date, she cooked me dinner in her tiny studio apartment and apologized for not taking me somewhere nicer. I almost proposed on the spot. Finding someone who appreciated the value of things was like finding water in a desert. I met Jess when the library's AC died during a July heat wave. The building hit 85 degrees while I was there fixing a failed compressor and electrical issues. For 3 straight days, I pulled 12-hour shifts to get it working. She brought me ice water every hour. On day 3, she handed me her number on a library card with, "I don't usually check out guys working at the library, but I'll make an exception." Her awkward delivery was somehow perfect. We matched. 2 weeks of silence followed. No calls, no text from my family. I ignored Mom's call 3 days later, and Dad's text about discussing things like adults. What he actually meant was discussing how I could keep giving them money while they gave me nothing. Dad's text actually said, "We need to clear the air about your inappropriate behavior at dinner. Your mother is very upset. Call us when you're ready to act like an adult." Translation, "We need you to apologize for embarrassing us in front of your friends and then get back to funding our lifestyle." Not happening. At work, Mike noticed the change in me. "Dude, you look different," he said as we finished installing a new system at a restaurant. Mike's been there through everything. When I couldn't make rent during that first year as an HVAC apprentice, it was his couch I crashed on. When I wanted to upgrade the engine in my truck, we spent 3 weekends in his garage, covered in grease, getting it done. The guy's more family to me than my actual family. We were installing a new rooftop unit at this upscale restaurant. It was January in Minnesota, which meant working in 10-degree weather on an icy roof with the wind cutting through our coveralls. Most guys would be complaining, but Mike and I had a system. He'd handle the connections while I managed the crane. Then we'd switch so nobody got too cold in one spot. Efficient, no whining, just getting it done. He was right about the change. For the first time in years, I wasn't constantly anxious about my phone ringing with another family emergency. I checked my bank statements and added it up. I'd given them $13,400 last year alone. That's a decent used car, or a nice vacation I'd never had. The numbers were actually worse than I initially calculated. I went through my online banking history, credit card statements, and even dug up the checkbook registers I'd kept. Yeah, I still use paper registers. Old habits die hard. $4,800 for mom's dental implants, $2,200 for their property tax shortfall, $1,800 for Alex's car insurance after his third fender bender, $950 for the plumber when their water heater flooded the basement. The list went on and on. Each time, it was an emergency that they'd pay back when things stabilized. Things never stabilized. 18 days after New Year's, Derek called with news. I ran into your brother at that sports bar by your old place last night. He was complaining to anyone who would listen about how you're screwing over your parents. But get this, he let slip that they refinanced the house 3 times, not just for the reverse mortgage. They used the money to buy that boat they keep at the lake, pay for his wedding at that golf resort, and invest in his friend's sports memorabilia business that went belly up. That was money they had sworn they needed for medical bills and home repairs. Money I'd helped them make payments on for years, thinking I was keeping them afloat through a health crisis. The boat turned out to be a 26-foot bayliner with twin engines, docked at a premium Lake Minnetonka slip, a $42,000 steal funded by their third refinance. While they couldn't help with my $4,800 student loan during my post-layoff unemployment, they somehow found $35,000 for Alex's golf club wedding that same year. And that sports memorabilia investment? Just Alex's college roommate buying random signed jerseys and baseball cards before disappearing with most of the cash. The worthless leftovers sat moldering in my parents' garage. The next day, I consulted with a lawyer, a guy whose commercial building I'd fixed the HVAC system in during a July heat wave. He remembered me and offered to help pro bono when I explained what was happening. He confirmed I couldn't easily remove myself as co-signer on the reverse mortgage without screwing myself over even worse, but helped me develop a plan. The lawyer, Kevin, ran a small practice specializing in real estate and contract law. When I fixed his building's AC during that 102-degree heat wave, I'd found a way to reroute the system to keep his server room cool, even while parts of the main system were down for repair. Saved him thousands in potential data loss. He remembered that when I walked into his office 2 years later, it didn't take long for them to start contacting me. Mom called first. The bank says you're trying to remove yourself from the loan. They're threatening foreclosure. You can't do this to us. Next came Alex. Dude, what the hell? Mom and Dad are freaking out about the house. I can't deal with them like this. You need to fix this. I didn't respond to either. Then I got an email from some lawyer. My mother had told him I'd verbally committed to covering the mortgage indefinitely, and they wanted to formalize the arrangement. I forwarded it to my lawyer without comment. They have no case, he assured me. But they're clearly desperate. The email from their lawyer was a joke. He claimed I had ongoing financial responsibility to support my elderly parents based on some obscure filial responsibility statute that doesn't even apply in Minnesota. He also tried to suggest that my years of financial support had established a pattern of care that constituted an implied contract. Kevin, my lawyer, actually laughed when he read it. This guy either doesn't know the law or is hoping you don't, he said. Either way, he's blowing smoke. Do not respond directly to any of these communications. I blocked their numbers, changed my email address, and gave the new one only to people I trusted. I focused on work, picked up extra shifts, and, for the first time in my adult life, started building actual savings. The first time I checked my bank account after a full pay period of not giving them money, I actually did a double take at the balance. $3,842.17. More money than I'd had at once in years. By the third pay period, I had over $10,000 in savings. I opened a separate high-yield account just for my emergency fund, something I'd read about but never been able to do. I took on a side gig installing smart home systems on weekends, something I taught myself through YouTube tutorials and online forums. Started charging $45 per hour and was booked 3 weekends in advance within a month, while Alex was posting Instagram stories about his entrepreneurial journey, whatever that means. I was quietly stacking cash. His smart home side hustle started when I installed a Nest thermostat and some security cameras at my apartment. My landlord saw it and asked if I could do the same for his house. Then he referred me to his brother, who wanted a full system with automated lighting, smart locks, security, and climate control. Word spread, and suddenly I was getting calls from people willing to pay serious money for custom installations. I created a simple website, printed some basic business cards, and set up a Square account for credit card payments. Almost no startup costs, pure profit. I finally got the transmission in my truck rebuilt properly. Something I'd been putting off for 2 years because every time I saved up enough, someone in my family needed money. Small victories, but they felt huge. Jess moved in, cutting my rent burden in half. She brought her bookshelf full of paperbacks and her grandmother's old quilt, and suddenly my apartment felt like a home. I signed up for night classes to finish my engineering degree. Would you believe my first exam was literally 20 years after I started college? Jess made me flashcards and quizzed me before tests, just like we were college kids. Moving day with Jess was just us and Mike with his pickup. She owned exactly 1 carload of stuff: her books, clothes, a desk she'd refinished herself, and a collection of coffee mugs from every library she'd ever worked at. No fancy furniture, no expensive electronics, just practical things with stories behind them. We carried it all up to my apartment in one afternoon, then sat on the floor eating pizza because we were too tired to cook. She looked around at my sparse place and said, "It already feels more like home than anywhere I've lived." I knew right then I was going to marry her. I tallied up everything I'd given my family: actual loans, bill payments, emergency bailouts, and co-signed loans I'd made payments on. The total was $112,648 over 10 years. That number hit me like a truck. That's a house down payment in most places. That's a completed degree with no loans. The spreadsheet I created to track all their loans was eye-opening. I had to dig through a decade of bank statements, credit card bills, and check registers. Each entry represented a time they'd called with an emergency or a temporary shortfall. I printed the spreadsheet and taped it to my fridge as a reminder of what I was never doing again. My parents tried showing up at my workplace. I was on a job site and my boss, who'd heard enough stories over the years, told them to leave or he'd call the police. Alex left messages on my work phone, calling me every name in the book, until my boss blocked that number too. They stalked me at work, showing up at 3 different job sites. First, I was working on a roof when my boss radioed, "Those people you warned me about are here." Next, they cornered an apprentice in the parking lot, fishing for my schedule. The third time, they brought Alex, who screamed up at me on scaffolding. My boss threatened to call the police, and they bolted. Afterward, he assigned me to remote locations for weeks to shake them off. The final straw came when my landlord called. "There's an older couple here trying to get into your apartment. They say they're your parents, and it's an emergency." I drove home to find my parents sitting in their car outside my building. When they saw me, they practically jumped out like it was a SWAT raid. Finally, Dad exclaimed, "You can't just ignore us, we're your parents. What do you want?" I asked, keeping my distance. "The bank is serious this time," Mom said, eyes red. "They're starting foreclosure proceedings. We could lose the house." "Not my problem," I replied. "How can you say that?" Dad's voice rose. "We need $18,000 to catch up on the payments. Just this once, and then we'll figure something out." "Like leaving everything to Alex?" I asked. They exchanged glances. "We've been talking about that," Mom said carefully. "We might have been hasty." "So, my inheritance is suddenly back on the table now that you need money?" "Family helps family," Dad insisted. "You know Alex can't help. He's going through a rough patch." "For 20 years, I interrupted. "That's not a rough patch. That's his entire personality, standing there, watching them try to manipulate me again." Something finally clicked into place. This wasn't going to stop, ever. They would take and take until there was nothing left, then discard me again the moment they didn't need me. 20 years from now, I'd be 60 years old with nothing saved, still working myself to death to fund their retirement and Alex's failures. "I'll make you a deal," I said finally. "I've talked to my lawyer. He's drawn up paperwork. I'll pay off the reverse mortgage entirely, not just catch you up, but pay it off completely, under 3 conditions. Their eyes lit up. "Anything," Mom said quickly. "First, you transfer the house to my name completely. Second, you can live there until you die, but you pay me rent. Actual market rate rent, not some token amount. Third, you sign a legally binding agreement that you'll never ask me for money again, for anything." Dad's face turned red. "That's extortion after everything we've done for you." "Like what, exactly? Name one thing," I challenged. "We raised you," Mom said, like that was some heroic sacrifice. "No, I raised myself while funding your lifestyle and Alex's failures." Dad slammed his hand on the hood of their car. "You're a disgrace. We're not signing our house over to you. We're not paying you rent. That's our house. No, it's the bank's house. And soon it won't be yours at all. You'd let your own parents be homeless?" Mom asked, tears flowing now. "What kind of son are you? The kind who's done being used. The one you've been happy to bleed dry for decades. The one you just disowned, in your will." I shrugged. Figure it out yourselves. Mom was sobbing now. You're abandoning your family. Guess I learned from the best. I turned and walked away, ignoring their calls. Their car was still there when I went inside. I could see them through my window, sitting there for another hour, probably expecting me to come out and apologize like I always had before. When they finally drove away, I felt nothing, just peace. I slept through the night for the first time in months. Later that night, Alex called, screaming threats about how he'd make me pay for not helping them. I hung up, blocked his number, and slept better than I had in years. That was 18 months ago. The bank foreclosed on my parents' house 6 months after our confrontation. They fought it, even tried to sue me for verbal contract breach or some bullshit. Their lawyer dropped them when they couldn't pay his retainer. The foreclosure process was ugly. They tried every trick in the book, claiming predatory lending practices, filing for emergency bankruptcy protection, even attempting to claim they had a verbal agreement with me to cover the payments. The judge threw out their case in under 10 minutes. Their lawyer, a different one from the email guy, quit when my parents couldn't pay his $5,000 retainer after the initial hearing. They represented themselves at the final proceeding, which went about as well as you'd expect. I cut all contact. The only person who still had any connection to that side of the family was my cousin Ryan. He'd seen how they treated me growing up and occasionally texted me updates, not because I asked, but because he thought I should know. They're living in that crappy apartment complex by the interstate, he told me one day. Your dad keeps telling everyone you'll come to your senses any day now. Ryan and I weren't close growing up, but he'd witnessed enough family gatherings to see the pattern. He was the only one who ever said anything about it. At my high school graduation, when my parents gave me a $50 gift card while Alex, who was still in 9th grade, got a new laptop for high school, Ryan was the one who pulled me aside and said, "That's messed up, man." We'd kept in loose contact ever since, mostly through social media, until all this went down. Meanwhile, my life took off like a rocket. Without 3 extra adults draining my bank account, I started saving serious money. Finished my engineering degree in 14 months with a 3.95 GPA, got hired by a commercial HVAC design firm making twice what I was before. Going back to school at 35 wasn't easy. I was easily 15 years older than most students in my classes. The first day, some kid asked if I was the professor, but I had something they didn't: 2 decades of hands-on experience with the systems we were studying theoretically. What they learned from textbooks, I'd fixed with my own hands in 110-degree attics and freezing basements. Professors started using me as a resource, asking me to explain real-world applications. My final project, a retrofitting system for improving energy efficiency in older commercial buildings, won the department's Innovation Award and led directly to my new job. The side business with Mike exploded. We incorporated, hired 2 guys, and now have contracts with 3 property management companies. Last quarter, my share of the profits was more than I used to make in a year. Mike handles the business side while I oversee the technical work and training. We started with residential smart home installations but quickly expanded into commercial IoT systems, connecting entire office buildings to centralized monitoring and maintenance protocols. Our big breakthrough came when we landed a contract with Ridgemont Properties, which manages 22 commercial buildings in the metro area. They wanted to reduce their energy costs by 15% and modernize their entire portfolio. That one contract doubled our business overnight. 6 months after cutting off my parents, I put a down payment on a modest 3-bedroom house with a big garage in a quiet neighborhood. Never thought I'd own anything like this. Nothing fancy about my house, just a well-maintained 1970s split level with 1,800 square feet on a quarter acre. Still had the 1990s era oak cabinets, laminate counters, and beige carpet upstairs. But it had solid bones, a good roof, and what mattered most, a 2-car garage big enough for a proper workshop. The fenced backyard featured a massive maple tree for summer shade. Max claimed it immediately, marking every corner like he was planting flags on the moon. Upgraded from the 2012 F-150 to a 2018 that doesn't have a single mechanical issue. Still do most of the maintenance myself, but now it's because I enjoy it, not because I can't afford a mechanic. The new truck wasn't even on my radar until my transmission guy called about a trade-in that had just come in, a 2018 F-150 XLT with the towing package and only 42,000 miles. Dark blue with gray interior and immaculately maintained. The guy had kept a maintenance log in the glove box with every oil change, tire rotation, and inspection documented. I paid cash, $27,800, and drove it home that day. Jess moved in right away. We turned the spare bedroom into a library for all her books. I built the shelves myself, She still works at the library but got promoted to head of programming for the youth department. She's amazing with those kids. Her promotion came 3 months after we moved in. The previous youth programming director retired, and the library board unanimously selected Jess to take over. She'd created this popular weekly STEM program for middle school girls that had tripled attendance figures and attracted grant funding from local tech companies. Now she manages all the children's and teen activities, from story time for toddlers to coding workshops for high schoolers. Her salary jumped by $12,000, which she immediately split between retirement savings and a fund for house renovations. Last spring, I took her camping at that same lake, but this time I had a ring in my pocket. Simple thing, nothing flashy but good quality. She said yes before I even finished asking. We're getting married next summer, small ceremony, just friends. We're putting the wedding money toward renovating the kitchen instead. I proposed at sunset on the shore of Lake Minnetonka, not at one of the crowded public beaches, but a small access point I knew about from working on houses in the area. Had a small fire going, camp chairs set up, and Max wearing a ridiculous bow tie collar I'd bought for the occasion. I'd planned this whole speech, but when the moment came, I just held out the ring and got about 3 words in before she tackled me with a hug and said yes. The wedding plans reflect who we are: practical, no nonsense, focused on the long game. Ceremony at a state park with about 40 guests, followed by a barbecue reception. Meanwhile, we're putting $30,000 into a kitchen renovation that will add actual value to our lives every day for years to come. New cabinets, quartz countertops, upgraded appliances, and proper ventilation. Obviously, it's my profession after all. Then, just when I thought I was done with the family drama, Ryan called about 8 months after the foreclosure with some interesting news. Dude, Alex's wife caught him screwing his CrossFit instructor in their minivan in the gym parking lot. She kicked him out, filed for divorce, and is going for full custody. The instructor was apparently a 23-year-old fitness influencer who'd been giving Alex private sessions for months. Vanessa suspected something when their credit card statements showed payments for personal training 5 times a week, but she caught them in the act. Turns out they weren't even trying to hide it. Alex's Subaru was parked right in the front row of the gym parking lot with condensation on all the windows, despite it being 78 degrees outside. The divorce was brutal. Vanessa's dad is a partner at a big law firm and made sure she got everything: the house, the cars, full custody of their kids, massive child support that Alex can't afford. From what Ryan told me, Alex tried to claim he had no income to avoid paying, but her lawyer found his crypto accounts and day trading records. The judge was not impressed. Alex had been bragging to everyone about his investment portfolio and how he was building generational wealth through strategic crypto positions. In reality, he'd blown about $40,000 on meme coins and NFTs of cartoon monkeys, most of which were now worthless. He'd also been day trading on margin, which the divorce discovery process revealed in excruciating detail. With nowhere to go, Alex moved in with my parents in their 1-bedroom apartment. According to Ryan, it lasted exactly 3 weeks before Alex bailed. Last Ryan heard, he was couch surfing with some buddies while being $92,000 in debt. My parents' situation got worse. Dad had another heart problem but couldn't afford the treatment he needed. Mom lost her dental office job when they downsized. The apartment they ended up in was essentially a studio in a converted motel from the 1960s. They were living on Dad's Social Security and whatever Mom could make doing part-time bookkeeping for cash under the table. The medical bills kept piling up because Dad refused to adjust his lifestyle after his heart issues. Still ate red meat every day, still refused to walk anywhere if he could drive, still thought vegetables were rabbit food. Ryan texted me. They keep asking if I've heard from you. I just say no and change the subject. Ryan mentioned that at the last family gathering, my parents spent the entire time telling a revisionist history of our relationship. In their version, they had sacrificed everything to put me through school, had loaned me thousands for my business that I never repaid, and I had abandoned them in their time of need out of selfishness. The family members who had witnessed their favoritism over the years just exchanged glances but didn't contradict them. No point arguing with people so committed to their own alternate reality. Didn't think about them much until last month. I was in the garage, changing the oil in my truck while watching a football game, when Jess came out looking confused. "Your parents are in the driveway," she said. I walked out to find them standing next to a rusted-out Corolla I didn't recognize. Dad looked 20 years older. Mom had lost weight, her clothes hanging off her frame. "How did you find this address?" I asked, not inviting them in. "We saw your company website," Mom said quietly. "What do you want?" Dad tried to stand up straighter, summoning some dignity. Son, we've hit a rough patch. The landlord's selling our building. We need a place to stay for a while until we get back on our feet. Where's Alex? I asked. Mom looked away. We haven't heard from him in months. Funny how that works out. Please, Dad said, his voice cracking. We have nowhere else to go. I looked at them, these people who had used me for decades and discarded me the moment I stopped being useful. That's what happens when you back the wrong horse. We're your parents. No, you're strangers who happen to share my DNA. You made your choice a long time ago. So you're just going to leave us homeless? Dad asked, anger replacing the pleading. I'm not leaving you anything. You did this to yourselves. You chose Alex. You can find him and ask him for help. They stood there for a minute, maybe waiting for me to change my mind. I didn't. Finally, they got back in their car and drove away. Jess came out and put her arm around me. You okay? Yeah, I said, and I meant it. Let's finish watching the game. There was a moment, a flicker of that old programming telling me I should help them. Then I remembered the spreadsheet. $112,648 in one direction, zero coming back. I remembered 20 years of choosing Alex over me, and any hesitation I might have felt evaporated.